Today, with handout 1.02, we have a number of things to talk about: cadences, the Neapolitan, augmented sixth chords, modes and other scales, and harmonic sequences. I expect this handout to take at least two movies. We'll take a look after we get to augmented sixth chords. We might have to have a separate movie for modes and other scales. At all events, let's get started with cadences, shall we? Here's what I'm sure is review for many of you. Just a review of authentic cadences, half cadences, the plagal cadence, and the deceptive cadence. Authentic cadences to begin with. Authentic cadences because authentic cadences are our most decisive harmonic punctuation that we have available to us. What makes an authentic cadence authentic? This. We find motion from root position 5 or 5-7 to root position tonic. Let me say that again. Root position 5 or root position 5-7 to root position tonic. As it turns out, this root position 5 or root position 5-7 can be preceded by the cadential 5-6-4, a chord that is spelled as a second inversion tonic triad but functions as a dominant. The cadential 5-6-4 is typically metrically accented. Don't worry for now if you don't spot all of your cadential 5-6-4s if you label them instead as 1-6-4s. Not to worry. In time, I'd like to persuade you that 5-7, or I'm sorry, 5-6-4 is a preferable analysis, but that will take a little time. But once again, here's the bottom line about authentic cadences. Root position 5 or 5-7 to root position 1. Now we can distinguish between perfect authentic cadences and imperfect authentic cadences. To the perfect authentic cadence, let us stipulate this. Tonic must be present in the soprano of the tonic triad. That is to say, scale degree 1 must be present in the soprano of the tonic triad. So then, an imperfect authentic cadence, for an imperfect authentic cadence, let us stipulate this. The soprano of the tonic triad will be either scale degree 3 or scale degree 5, but not scale degree 1, because that would make it a perfect authentic cadence. Very important to know the distinction between these two kinds of authentic cadences, the perfect and the imperfect. As for the half cadence, it always concludes on a root position dominant triad. I really want to stress those two things: root position and a triad. Root position dominant triad. Not an inverted dominant, not a 5-7 chord. No, a 5-7 chord is too unstable for it truly to serve as a half cadential dominant. There's a special kind of half cadence that you run into every now and then in minor keys, and that's called the Phrygian half cadence, and it consists of motion from a minor 4-6 to a root position dominant triad. As for the plagal cadence and the deceptive cadence, first of all, about the plagal cadence. Most plagal cadences are really quite rare. A plagal cadence you probably learned years ago as motion from a root position subdominant to a root position tonic. Again, actual plagal cadences are quite rare in tonal music of the common practice period. And indeed, most so-called plagal cadences can be better understood as post-cadential extensions of tonic. We won't worry about that point just so much, but just bear it in mind. Actual plagal cadences in tonal music are quite rare. As for the deceptive cadence, your so-called classic deceptive cadence moves from a root position 5 to a root position submediant triad. Again, that submediant triad in major keys is minor in quality. In minor keys, the submediant is major in quality. A deceptive move from 5 to 4/6 is also possible because those chords share the same scale degree in the bass, scale degree 6. Most so-called deceptive cadences are really deceptive resolutions. I don't use the term deceptive cadence too often, but I often will use the term deceptive resolution. The reason for this is that the term cadence should be reserved for genuine cadences. Now I know what you're asking. How do you know whether a cadence is genuine or not? It takes patience, takes practice, takes experience, but that's what you are here for. The takeaway from this section really should be the material about authentic cadences, perfect and imperfect, and the half cadence. Let's move on now to talk about the Neapolitan. The Neapolitan has predominant harmonic function. We hear a Neapolitan and we expect to hear a dominant coming after it. The root of the Neapolitan is the lowered second scale degree, that scale degree to which lies one chromatic half step lower than regular diatonic scale degree 2. For instance, in the key of C major, regular diatonic scale degree 2 is D. So if we wanted to have a Neapolitan in C, we would need to have a root of not D, but the tone that's one chromatic half step lower than D, D flat. The quality of the Neapolitan is always major. It is always a major triad. It doesn't matter if you're in a major key or a minor key, the Neapolitan is a major triad. Typically, but not always, typically, the Neapolitan is found in first inversion. So the chordal third is in the bass. And that bass, the chordal third, which is also scale degree 4, is typically the tone that is doubled. Standard resolution of a Neapolitan sixth chord in first inversion, a Neapolitan sixth, is to a root position dominant triad. As for your augmented sixth chords, these too have predominant harmonic function. After you hear an augmented sixth chord, look for there to be some kind of relatively important dominant chord. Very often a root position dominant triad, sometimes the cadential 5-6-4, sometimes, sure, a 5-7, a root position 5-7. The important thing, though, is that all standard augmented sixth chords have predominant harmonic function. Speaking of our standard augmented sixth chords, they each have three things in common, and I like to take it in this order. Let's begin with the bass. The bass of any standard augmented sixth chord is going to be one diatonic half step above the dominant. So take standard theory C major, the dominant is G, so the bass of an augmented sixth chord in C will be A flat, because A flat lies one diatonic half step above the dominant. Moving on, an upper voice, doesn't matter which one, soprano, alto, tenor, doesn't matter. An upper voice will be one diatonic half step below the dominant. So again, standard theory C major, the dominant is G. One diatonic half step below G is F sharp. So one of the upper voices, again, soprano, alto, tenor, doesn't matter, will have to be F sharp. The last thing that all standard augmented sixth chords have in common is tonic, scale degree 1. So our standard augmented sixth chord in C major will also have C in an upper voice. The bass will be A flat, and then two of the upper voices will be F sharp and C. This is what all standard augmented sixth chords have in common, these three things. Let's move on now to talk about our three specific national augmented sixth chords. First of all, your Italian augmented sixth chord. This is our only three-note augmented sixth chord. The scale degree, or the tone rather to double, is the tonic, scale degree 1. Standard resolution is to a root position dominant triad. Your French augmented sixth chord has, in addition, in an upper voice, scale degree 2, or solfege syllable re. You see how re, R-E, is buried in the word French. Kind of a neat trick. The standard resolution of a French augmented sixth chord is to a root position dominant triad. Your German augmented sixth chord has, in addition to the three standard things that all augmented sixth chords have in common, your German augmented sixth chord has, in addition, a perfect fifth above the bass. Very often, the German augmented sixth chord will resolve to a cadential 5-6-4, followed by a root position dominant triad. As for the doubly augmented 4-3 chord, I included a little information here, but let's not worry about that for now. If we find a doubly augmented 4-3 chord in the class, I'll point one out to you, but that's nothing to worry about. How about if I stop this movie here and I'll have to make another one for modes and other scales?